Howdy everyone. So I'm still plugging away at getting the canopy trimmed, and of course it's just a matter of trimming, sanding, fitting, trimming, sanding, fitting, and you keep working it down until you get it to where you are comfortable with it and you like the way that it fits and you're happy with the way that it looks. So here's one of my other setups in one of the videos that my wife had taken, or the couple of videos that she had taken. You saw the wood framework that was out here, and the canopy was right side up, and the edges, the sides of the canopy, were braced with wood blocks to keep it from spreading. That works really well to trim this initial front edge and to obviously do the separating cut, what is popularly whatever, it's the big cut. Having it right side up in a frame is best. But I found that once this front is basically the way that you want it, cutting the side pieces and now final trimming the back, it's easier for me anyway to have it upside down like you see it here. So that's kind of what I've been doing. I've been going a little back and forth between upside down and right side up, kind of flipping it around and trimming it. I'm getting very close now. I'm basically done cutting. I'm basically doing nothing more than sanding at this point. And I'll go back and I'll cover the tools that I'm using to do that a little bit later. So now this front is basically done. I just have to do a final sanding. Like I said, I'd like to try to buff all of these edges when I'm finished. So now I have a little bit of trimming to do on the sides, or not trimming, I've got some sanding to do on the sides just to even up this edge because it's kind of wavy. And I'm going to trim back this back edge here. I've got a line drawn that I got to trim to. So I'm going to cut this short because my neighbor's coming through with his mower, and I'll talk to you later.
Howdy everyone. Alright, so now he's trimming the canopy. Hopefully you can be able to see a little bit. I'm still videotaping through the sliding glass door, which, as you can tell, we need to replace this door, so it's a little cloudy. Alright, let's see. I guess he already did a video of explaining more what he's doing, so I don't really need to tell you much. Once again, you can watch in silence. Sorry, can't see much. It's our neighbor Ron cutting his grass. Alright, well maybe that's good for now. Alright, I'll leave it a little bit more. Alright, maybe I'll get more later. Howdy everyone. A little bit more here since he's on this side and I think you can see a little bit better. And I think he put a different head on it there. Alright, well, maybe that's pretty good for now. Alright, see you later.
Howdy, everyone. All right, so let me get you caught up on where I've been on this canopy. I've basically just been doing the repetitive fit, trim ordeal, right? So I just take the canopy, put it on the fuselage, walk around, press on it, push on it, readjust it, tweak it, whatever I need to do. See where there is interference, if any, around the framing, and then maybe make some reference marks on the canopy itself. Take the canopy outside. Depending on how I'm trimming, I either trim it, I take this wood bracing out with it and trim it on this, or I flip it upside down and just lay it on these pads, on these comforters, old bed comforters for padding. The vast majority of the trimming I do with it upside down just because it's easier to get to all of the edges. The trimming went pretty quick, and again, I'll go over the tools here at some point that I used. It's basically more sanding than anything else. The trim, what I call trimming, is basically when you cut the bigger chunks, the bigger pieces of plexiglass free, and then you use different sanding techniques to work it down that final 3/16 of an inch or so. One thing for me personally, the so-called big cut, when you split it in half, or it's not in half, but you separate the front canopy from the rear window, when you make that cut, that to me was a complete 100% non-event. What was the biggest challenge for me was cutting the front. There's a lot of stuff going on with the front because you've got you've got all these compound curves in the plexiglass, right? Up here, you've got the curve, the swoop going up, and then it's also curved this way a little bit. And then when you get down to these corners, you've got a curve kind of in this orientation, a little bit coming down, but not as much. And then by the time you get to the sides, it's almost straight down with no curve at all. There's a lot of compound curves in this front area just on the canopy. And then on the framing, it's the same thing. You've got your glare shield that kind of runs uphill underneath the canopy. And then you've got the curve of the canopy, which you can kind of see here that I've laid out with a marker. And then you've got the downward curve of the skin. So you've got an upward trend, a curve, a downward curve. And then, of course, as the skin runs from front to back, it kind of opens up this way. So cutting the front of this and trimming it and getting it to fit was a heck of a lot bigger challenge and a lot more stressful than making this separation cut. That was for me personally. Not difficult, not hard, just very tedious. Like I said, a lot of fit and trim, fit and trim, fit and trim. And for me, I did everything outside. So I'd have to carry the canopy outside, get all my PPE put on, trim it, take all my PPE off, my personal protection equipment, protective equipment, bring it inside. Let me back up. Take it outside, put on my safety gear, trim it, take off my safety gear, clean myself off of all the debris, clean the canopy off of all the debris, bring it in the shop, fit it, and then repeat over and over and over and over a couple of 3 days. So, like I said, it's not hard work, just tedious. So the canopy is now finished. I don't believe I have anything else to do to it. You can see where I've retaped it. I've got it fit as good as I can get it, that I'm happy with. I don't want to keep trimming it too far, chasing things, because just like the framing, you make a change over here and it makes a little bit of it causes an effect over here. And I didn't want to keep chasing, little gap here, little gap there. I didn't want to keep chasing that and basically making the canopy smaller and smaller and smaller. So I'm done. I polished all the edges really, really nice. I worked it all the way down to a 600 grit sandpaper. And it is done. I've got everything nice and straight. Is it perfect? No. When you look at these long edges on the bottom, do they look straight? Yes. When you run your fingers across the bottom, you can feel, a little dip here and there as you run your finger across. It looks straight, but you can feel as you run your hand across, you can feel a little bit of waviness, just in a few spots. Very mild. I'm not worried about it. Like I said, I'm not going to chase it down. So that's done. Now I am transitioning over to working on this back window. I've already positioned it. I've got it moved forward a little bit. I still have my reference line on the roll bar. I've got the canopy overlapping the roll bar ever so slightly over top of this reference mark. And I had it held in place, and I reached in from here. I reached inside and traced along the edge of the skin onto the canopy. And I'm going to make a new line outside of that line. So this black line here represents the actual skin. And from that black line, I'm going to come out. I haven't decided how far. I'm going to come out from that black line and draw another line, which will be where I cut it. And this is going to be just more of the same of the canopy. Fit it, take it outside, trim it, fit it, trim it. And I'm going to work it as close as I can to this line. Now, I'm not going to get it perfect because I want it to fit to the canopy, the back half of the canopy. I'm not concerned about how it looks in relationship to that reference line. I want it close, but I need it to fit nice with the actual canopy. Of course, the canopy is all laid out and cut by hand, so the canopy doesn't perfectly match this line, but it's very close. So I'm going to fit this to the canopy once I do my final adjustments. So I'm going to take this outside. I'm going to start cutting it down so I can at least fit it inside the skin instead of having it resting on the outside. I want to start fitting it into the skin all the way around. And then when I get close, I'll put the canopy in place and fit the canopy to where it wants to be, and then I'll fit it. And again, I say that term, let the canopy sit where it wants to. I've talked about that in my other videos where I put the canopy on and kind of move it around. Now that it's been cut to final shape, that becomes very obvious when you put it on and you start moving it around. You can tell when it kind of takes a set. And I keep checking my center reference lines on the front and back, and they're always very, very close. I'm talking within probably an eighth, no more than an eighth. So I'm happy with that. This trim line here on the side of the canopy where you trim it down along this curve, you want to make sure that you trim enough off so that the canopy does not rest on the bend itself. You want it to lay only on this flat. So pay very close attention to that. And you want a lot of material there vertically, because if you're going to do what I'm doing and put screws in it, you want a lot of edge distance on the canopy itself. So you want it to come down to this line, but you want to make sure it's not resting up on this bend. The other thing is, if you've done everything correctly with the frame, if you've constructed the frame correctly, if you've got your spacers set correctly, you've got this angle here set correctly, and everything is correct, on the roll bar inside here, you have this heavy metal aluminum angle here. This back window, does it? Yes, this back window, this corner of the back window here will rest on the top of that angle, as will the back corner of the canopy. It will come through the rail here. It will sit behind this skin, and it may or may not rest on this aluminum angle. Now, I've heard people talk about having to notch the canopy back here to clear that. My opinion is, if you've got everything on the frame laid out correctly, this line here comes all the way across and it transitions cleanly over top of that aluminum bracket. So your canopy should follow this line, and it should transition over behind this skin over top of that aluminum angle without having to notch it. That's how it is with my canopy. I don't have to notch anything back here. It flows cleanly from across this rail, behind the skin, and over top of that angle. I don't even think it's touching. I think there might be like an 1/8 inch of a gap on each side. Okay, another long-winded hooey. Again, just trying to point some stuff out to you guys to be aware of. I'm going to get cranking on this back window, and I'll talk to you later.